Hey everybody, welcome back. We are joined by someone that I was so moved by when I saw a segment for a conversation with Tucker Carlson. Kara Dansky, a self-described radical feminist. Is that fair?
Yes, absolutely.
And you have some opinions on this transgender topic.
I do, and I write all about them in a book called The Abolition of Sex, How the Transgender Agenda Harms Women and Girls.
What's so wrong with the transgender movement? Why would a radical feminist care about that?
Yeah, so, I mean, radical feminism is all about protecting the rights, privacy, and safety of women and girls. And we cannot do that as a movement if we cannot define the category of women and girls to exclude males.
It's rare to be able to talk to somebody like you, because I've been saying, where are the feminists?
Yeah, right. It's a really good question. And Senator Paul, when he was questioning Dr. Levine to be Assistant Secretary of Health at HHS, asked that very question, where are the feminists? Most mainstream media outlets will not talk about us. The New York Times will not talk about us. The Washington Post, NBC, ABC, CBS, MSNBC, none of them will platform leftist, feminist, gay rights critiques of gender identity. And just so you know, I don't call it the transgender agenda. I just call it fighting for women and girls.
Yes. So why shouldn't we call it the transgender dilemma or issue or whatever?
Several decades ago, out of the academy, coming out of postmodernism, there was something called queer theory. And what queer theory essentially did was it decided that biological sex is not a binary. And it wanted to make that mainstream. But if it tried to go mainstream by telling average, ordinary American citizens across the political spectrum that sex isn't real, it would have failed spectacularly, because all Americans know how babies are made. And so they made up a word, and the word that they made up is transgender. And that word has done a remarkable job in persuading Americans, again, across the political spectrum, that there is some discrete, coherent category of people called transgender people who are somehow neither male or female, and it's just not true. Today, and I know that it might be difficult to believe, but there are a lot of lesbians and gay men who are saying no to including the T in the LGBT acronym. And they're very frustrated because for lesbians and gay men, biological sex is really relevant. You can't protect same-sex attraction if there's no such thing as actual sex.
How are we got to a place where even defining the terms kind of sows confusion? If I could give one example, Apple iPhone says men could get pregnant.
Right. So the whole notion of pregnant men or pregnant people, I would argue it is meant to confuse Americans. It is meant to make us forget that biological sex is grounded in material reality. If we can all be persuaded that men can get pregnant, then all of a sudden femaleness has been made distinct from pregnancy in our minds. Even though we all know it's not true, they're working really hard to persuade us.
You have something on your shirt. Just can you explain that really quick? I think it's super interesting.
So my shirt says woman, noun, adult human, female. And just very quickly, this became a thing when in 2018, a woman in the United Kingdom named Kelly J. Keane put a poster proclaiming that on a big sign in Liverpool, England. And someone decided that that was offensive. The dictionary definition of woman is offensive, and successfully campaigned to have it removed. So she didn't like that, and so she started an organization called Standing for Women. And I also just want to say, because your listeners have no reason to know this, opposition to gender identity in the UK is mainly coming from rank-and-file members of the Labour Party. And their media will talk about it. Here, most of the opposition to gender identity is coming from the right, or it appears to be coming from the right. Certainly in Congress, that's true, and in state legislatures. But there are rank-and-file Democrats all over the country who are so fired up and angry about this, but they don't get a voice because the media will not cover our angle.
The University of Pennsylvania swimmer. This is an individual who was born a biological male, who is now competing as a female, winning every record possible. How did we get to a place where we were supposed to accept Jenner on the front page of Vanity Fair to all of a sudden now we really don't have female sports anymore?
So I went to UPenn Law, so this one is personal for me. I think it's perfectly fine to say that Leah Thomas is a man. We can just start there. We don't have to...
That's hate speech.
Right. I mean, but, well, this is a frustration. You know, you mentioned media. A frustration that I have with a lot of conservative media is there'll be headlines in conservative media that say transgender swimmer,
You're right.
transgender
That's
athlete.
Right.
And we don't have to do that. We can just say that Leah Thomas is a man. It's okay, it's fine. And in fact, I would argue it's critical for the reason we were talking about earlier. We have to stay grounded in the material reality of biological sex. And if we refer to Leah Thomas as anything other than a man, then that creates some questions in our own minds, and I think that's really dangerous.
Maybe I'm wrong, but I haven't seen the institutional outrage that I thought I would see.
You're not wrong. I mean, the NCAA has completely sold out women and girls on this. When Thomas was competing, I believe the rule was that a male swimmer had to have taken testosterone suppression for 1 year before competing on a women's team. I think that was the rule. It has since changed and gotten worse. But the idea that a man can suppress testosterone for 1 year and then thereby compete on the women's team is so insulting to women and girls. We are not men with less testosterone. We're actually complete human beings.
Yes, that's such an important point. So that doesn't satisfy you, because that's an argument I get from some of the activists.
No. I mean, first of all, the NCAA's rule really was just about 1 year of testosterone suppression. That's it. It's being reported that Thomas has made no other changes to his body and is changing in the women's locker room. But even if Thomas did make all those changes, no, he's still a man.
They lose their mind when you say that. And I guess your argument is, regardless of how much effort or technology you apply to your material reality with how you're born, it doesn't matter.
I am not in favor of people taking medically unnecessary cosmetic surgeries or extremely harmful hormones. I'm not a fan of that. If an adult wants to do that, there's nothing I can do to get in their way. But that doesn't mean that anyone changes sex.
Adults are one thing, but it's going to children now.
Children are being taught in schools as early, as far as I'm aware, as early as kindergarten, that you can either be a girl or a boy. It's up to you. And a lot of times we're seeing incidents where teachers are doing what's called socially transitioning kids, which is referring to the kid by a different name, opposite sex pronouns, letting the kid use the opposite sex bathrooms without parental knowledge. So these kids are gravely confused. And of course, once these kids are told that they can be either a girl or a boy, you plant that idea in a kid's mind, a kid's going to want to do that. And so our young people are being put on puberty blockers using off-label uses. Puberty blockers were invented to address a condition called precocious puberty. This is a condition experienced by some very small number of children where they enter puberty at a time when they're not emotionally or psychologically prepared to do so, before their peers are. So it's very confusing for them. So doctors will delay puberty, and these drugs exist and are approved by the FDA for that purpose. But now children who are actually entering puberty are being prescribed puberty blockers so that they do not have to go through their correct sex puberty. And it's awful. We do not know the long-term consequences of these drugs, except that we do know that a lot of these kids are getting sterilized at an age at which they ought not to be able to consent to such a thing. It's really terrible.
So in the state of Oregon, you can get sexual reassignment surgery, chemical castration, whatever you want to call it, without parental consent, funded by taxpayers.
That's my understanding. I think at the age of 15.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Is there a concerted effort to increase the population of transgender people?
Absolutely. That is absolutely a very deliberate part of this whole agenda. The Women's Liberation Front, on whose board I served from 2016 to 2020, is suing the state for its explicit policy, which Governor Newsom enacted in 2020, to allow convicted male prisoners and rapists to be housed in women's prisons on the basis of their so-called gender identity. I do not understand why this is not a national scandal. And it's not just California. That's where the lawsuit is pending. In Washington state, not pursuant to state law, but pursuant to the Department of Corrections policy, there is a man who goes by the name Princess who was convicted of raping a 12-year-old girl being held in the women's prison. Please do not write this off as the lunacy left, in California and Washington. It's happening all over the country.
What's your speculation as to why this is such a high priority in the kind of cultural hierarchy? I mean, it seems as if there's pharmaceutical companies that are pushing this. What do you think is the reason this is such a high priority to get implemented everywhere and have children believe it and all sorts of things?
I mean, I think you hit on something when you said pharma, right? I mean, who benefits from putting a lifetime's worth of young people on a lifetime's worth of hormones? There's a man named John Stryker who stands to inherit from a medical supply company, right? This is a multi-jillion-dollar medical supply company that benefits from encouraging a lot of people to get medically unnecessary cosmetic surgeries. He goes all over the place encouraging the quote-unquote LGBTQ agenda. He recently gave the ACLU $15 million in a one-time grant in March of 2021 to push LGBTQ. However, we have to understand that the ACLU does very little actual gay rights advocacy anymore.
But they're very big into that particular issue. Now, you go to their website, it's all over.
Whatever you might think about it, the gay rights movement was very successful in this country, and it was a very deliberate and intelligent strategy on the part of this other movement to attach itself to the LGB. Because if you ask a lot of lesbian, gay, and bisexual people if they find any common ground with TQIAA+++, whatever,
I don't know what those things.
Nobody does. Okay. But they will say no. They will say, no, that is not, I don't know what that is, but that is not us. That is not me trying to fight for my rights as a same-sex attracted person.
What's your experience been since you've decided to speak out and like go on Tucker Carlson and dare talk to the American right?
Yeah, so I mentioned I was on the board of Women's Liberation Front from 2016 to 2020. Now I'm the president of the U.S. chapter of Women's Declaration International, which anyone can find at womensdeclarationusa.com. And this is really all that I work on all the time. But I was part of the American so-called progressive criminal justice reform movement for about 20 years. I worked at the ACLU between 2012 and 2014. I've been doing this almost exclusively since around 2016 or 17 or so. And I've lost a lot of people in my life. I basically can't get work in the criminal justice reform community anymore.
Really?
Yeah, because I have said publicly that men aren't women.
You obviously have the resume, right? You've kind of done the work to show that you're on team left, but they're like, nope, you say this thing, you're out, you're done, you're off the island.
I've lost like my best friend of 30 years. Like she's really mad at me about this. And so she doesn't speak to me anymore. Like this is just the reality of what happens when you are a feminist on the left and you start to speak out about these things. You lose your career, you can lose friends and family. This is routine for women on the left who speak out.
What I find so fascinating is you're a radical feminist, I'm a Christian conservative, and we both so agree on this because we believe in material reality. In closing, what can people do? You said something so persuasive on Tucker's show. You said, do not use the term. It is not a real term. What can be done? What's the battle plan?
Well, that was a great segue.
Thank you.
I have a present for you and your team. I made these. I got so frustrated one day. I sat down at my laptop and I just made these. Hand these out, leave them around, put them on community billboards. This is what I've been doing.
Can I read it?
Yeah.
It says, psst, there's no such thing as transgender. It's okay to say so. And you don't have to use preferred pronouns either. Pass it on.
If people could get this message and feel empowered to say that and to share that with another one of their colleagues or friends, we can do this. And it's going to take Americans across the political aisle. I'm absolutely
I totally agree with you. Yes. And I just want to thank you. You're such a persuasive voice on this. And I have been looking and looking and looking for feminists to start to rise up on this issue. It's these interesting times really build these fun alliances. So thank you so much.
Definitely. Thank you.
Thank you.